Welcome to All Pro Football Data. My name is Jim Coburn, and today's episode, we're talking about Antoine Winfield Jr. in terms of his defensive safety free agency profile. So we're going to be looking at his pre-draft and post-draft production profile to determine his value in the 2024 free agency cycle. A lot of people have Antoine Winfield Jr. as a top safety available in free agency this year. But is he really the top safety? Is he really the top safety? We're going to find out, guys. So first off, just add a little tidbit of information. Winfield Jr. was named first team All-Pro in 2023, which of course was last year, and he went to a Pro Bowl in 2021. So he has accolades of a special safety, but did he really perform like that? So first off, let's start with his pre-draft profile, because the pre-draft profile kind of informs us what their potential can be at the NFL level. And also point out red flags at the NFL level as well, where if they don't test as well back in college and they kind of break out at like age 25, 26, they may not be consistent. There's always that kind of question there. So moving on to defensive market share data. If you're new to the channel, new to the work that I do a lot of work for pre-draft profiles in terms of defensive market share data. So you look at a raw statistic, which you turn into a market share score, and then you divide it by the team total to kind of give you the idea of what the prospect is. So basically, if a safety had 5 interceptions on a team that had 20 interceptions, then he had 25% interception market share. You take that number, you compare it to every single safety taken in the draft based on however long it is. I think based on the data I've done so far, it's about 1989, I believe. I might have to double check on that. But based on those parameters, you get a percentile score, which is how the scoring is done. So based on this data work, which is out of 1,980 safeties since the 1989 NFL draft class, he tested with a 98 percentile solo tackle score, 99 percentile interception score, and then a 38 percentile pass deflection score. So those numbers at the strong safety position are pretty strong, with the exception of his pass deflection score. So most All-Pro and Pro Bowl strong safeties typically average in the 80 percentile in terms of their pass deflection data. So that's kind of the biggest question mark for Antoine Winfield Jr. is his pass deflection data was just not really what you expected to be from an elite safety prospect. Moving on to his adjusted production scores. This takes a look at the context for his production. How productive was he for his age? How productive was he for his level of competition? Of course, how productive was he for the teams that he faced and the team that he played on, those types of things. And when you take a look at the context production, he was elite. He had an elite pass score, and he also had an elite age score. So he was a very young prospect who was extremely productive, and those are good marks to have. He basically tested like an all-pro safety based on his overall data. Looking at his athleticism testing, this is where things are kind of interesting with him. He had an 84 percentile explosive lower body strength score, which takes a look at the vertical and the broad jump. He also had a 91 percentile speed score, which definitely hits the areas that you're trying to look for in terms of, all-pro strong safety prospect. Didn't do the agility testing, so I kind of had to leave that off for him. But he tested as a explosive and very fast safety for his size. So he has elite production overall, contextually, and then he has elite athleticism traits for the safety position. What did he do at the NFL level? Well, this is how he has performed so far based on his data. So the data stuff that I'm using here is from Pro Football References, from their advanced stats data section, where I took all the data work from there, from all the safeties based on that data, and I was able to get these scores here, basically percentile scoring them. And the biggest thing that jumped out to me about Antoine Winfield was that he did not really do that well in terms of his coverage. And again, this is not based on, PFF. This is not based on my watching of the film. This is just based on the outcomes on the football field. And in terms of his overall coverage ability, when you look at completion percentage allowed in coverage, you look at yards allowed per completion, yards allowed per target, quarterbacker rating allowed, interceptions per target thrown, touchdowns allowed per target thrown, and then of course you have the coverage efficiency score, which basically takes all those scores and adds them all together and then ranks them. Winfield was a average to below average coverage guy based on his overall data. And he did have a big jump in terms of his interception percentage in 2023, but for the most part, he still was not that great in terms of his ability to, again, not allow that many yards per completion, not allow that many yards per target, not allow a lot of completions. He was based on his coverage ability, it just wasn't quite there for him based on his overall coverage ability. So you're kind of going, interesting. In terms of his data here. Now, when you look at his tackling ability, though, it's a different story. So when you look at COMB, which is combined tackles score, MTKL, which is number of missed tackles, missed tackle percentage, which is MTKL percentage sign, and then that gives you the tackle efficiency score. So you add up the combined tackles plus the missed tackle percentage score to give you the efficiency score. When you look at his tackle efficiency, he was elite. He had a 90 plus percentile, 98 percentile in 2023, 96 percentile in 2022, and then in 2020 he had a 92 percentile as well, with a 60 percentile score in 2021. So the things that he really did well back in college, because remember what I said about the context of college production. College can definitely inform you tendencies of players. What they typically did in college, or what things they had and mistakes they made, and tendencies they had in college typically show up in the NFL level. Players can improve, of course, but there's always going to be that lingering residue of the things that they didn't do as well back in college. And when you look at Antoine Winfield, the biggest concern he had coming out based on his production statistics in college was pass deflection market share, which kind of deals with coverage to a certain extent. But the things that he's doing really well is tackling, which he's obviously doing really well here. So that kind of makes you go, interesting, in terms of Antoine Winfield. Going to the end part of this, so when you take their coverage ability and their tackle efficiency ability, and you add those two scores up and combine them and rank them, it gives you the safety data score. The safety data score takes a look at coverage ability, missed tackle percentage, all the things I just went over, and then gives you this score. And when you look at this score, he has steadily improved every year. So year on year, he's improved in terms of pretty much every metric, especially his tackle efficiency has really improved. But his coverage ability has not really improved. In fact, it got worse in 2023 compared to 2022 and 2021. So for the most part, what you can expect from Winfield based on his past performances, which are only going to go downhill a little bit more as he gets older as a prospect, because as you get older, you naturally degrade a little bit in terms of your physical ability. He just does not look like a complete safety prospect. He's a little lopsided. He's a little bit heavier on the tackling side of things versus the coverage ability based on the data that he's been able to put up. So what does this say in terms of his future outlook? I think what this says is that Antoine Winfield Jr. profiles as an elite tackling safety, but he has consistently been a liability in coverage since 2020, and got worse in 2023 compared to what he did in 2022 and 2021. Don't let the interceptions fool you into thinking that just because he got 3 interceptions last year means that all of a sudden his coverage ability is no longer a problem, because you could pick the ball off 10 times a game, but if you allow 10 touchdowns a game, then it kind of comes out even to a certain extent. Except the touchdowns actually end up getting 6 points on the board. The interceptions, maybe not so much if the offense doesn't actually take those turnovers and pay the other team for making them. I would say based on his data, he's consistently been a top 24 safety since 2022, due to his coverage woes. I'd project Winfield Jr. to be worth a 5-year contract worth $6,136,090 a year, which is basically an inflation adjusted number for what the average inflation has been per year since um, basically based on a 5-year average. So based on all the inflation rates that we've had over the last 5 years, this is what the average inflation has been, about 4.18. The average salary for a top 24 safety is about $5 million a year. So I basically just adjusted his salary to go with what we would expect from inflation going forward over, say, a 5-year contract. And that's what he really should be expected to pay. He is just not consistent enough in coverage allowance to be paid top 5 to 10 safety money. So that is my general thoughts on Antoine Winfield Jr. based on his overall data. Is that yes, he is a elite tackling machine. Yes, he has shown the ability to make plays on the football in terms of interceptions. But has he shown the ability to be an elite coverage safety, or at least an above average coverage safety in his last 4 years in the NFL? I would say no, and in many ways he regressed last year based on his coverage ability, based on the data that Pro Football Reference provides for that particular metric. So that is my general feelings on Antoine Winfield Jr. I think if you're gonna sign him, you have to know these things first of all, you have to know these things up front. That he might be a player that you have to play close to the line of scrimmage. He might be a player that is a little bit of a liability in coverage, and you should be careful or wary of putting him one-on-one with a player, which comes back to just his size as well. I mean, the guy's 5'9", and he's not exactly doesn't exactly have crazy length for the position. So if you put a tall wide receiver up against him, a tall, bulky wide receiver up against him, he probably might not hold up as well against those particular players. Again, I'm making a assumption based on the data. The film might tell a totally different story based on everything that's going on with him. But again, that's why I do what I do. I show the statistics, and then you let the film argue for it or against it, however you want to make your decision. But personally, I would say Antoine Winfield Jr. realistically is, based on the production data, based on a complete safety. It depends on what you want. If you want a tackling safety, go get him. But if you want a safety that can play coverage, it can tackle, and kind of do everything that you want him to do, a complete safety prospect without liabilities and coverage, you might want to find somebody else to fill that spot. So with all that stuff out of the way, thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Jim Coburn. You can check out my other work at Geometrics on Twitter at JIMETRICS. Also check out my Patreon page, patreon.com/jcoburn. And I will see you guys in the next one. Peace!